October 25th, 1944, 6:58 a.m., 70 miles east of Samar Island, Philippine Sea. Commander Ernest E. Evans stands on the bridge of USS Johnston, watching four massive shapes emerge through the rain squalls on the horizon. His radar operator's voice crackles through the intercom. "Skipper, we've got multiple contacts. Range 35,000 yards. Speed 30 knots. They're big." Evans raises his binoculars. His blood runs cold. 4 Japanese battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 11 destroyers. The largest concentration of enemy naval power in the Pacific theater. And leading them, a ship so massive it doesn't seem real. Yamato, 72,000 tons, 9 18.1-inch guns. The most powerful battleship ever constructed. Between this armada and the American landing beaches at Leyte Gulf are 3 destroyers, 4 destroyer escorts, and 6 escort carriers. No battleships, no heavy cruisers, no backup. The odds are mathematically impossible. Johnston displaces 2,700 tons. Yamato displaces 72,000. The Japanese fleet could absorb every shell Johnston carries and barely notice. Standard naval doctrine says destroyers run from battleships. Every tactical manual agrees. Survival requires retreat. Ernest Evans makes a different choice. At 7 a.m., he orders general quarters. Then he says 7 words that will define the next 2 hours. Prepared to attack major portion of Japanese fleet. His crew thinks he's insane. The Japanese think they've already won. Both are wrong. If you want to see how one destroyer challenged the most powerful naval force in history and why a Japanese commander saluted as it went down, please hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Evans. He's about to do something nobody thought possible.
Ernest Edwin Evans was born May 13, 1908, in Pawnee, Oklahoma, part Cherokee, part Creek Nation. His grandfather walked the Trail of Tears in 1838. That heritage shaped everything about Evans: his stubbornness, his refusal to accept defeat, his willingness to fight against impossible odds. He graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1931, class of 31, not top of his class, not particularly distinguished, just solid, dependable, competent. The Navy assigned him to destroyer duty. He spent 13 years learning every system on those ships: gunnery, torpedoes, damage control, navigation. By 1943, Evans had been promoted to commander. The Navy gave him command of a brand-new Fletcher-class destroyer, USS Johnston, hull number DD-557. USS Johnston launched October 25, 1943, at Seattle-Tacoma Shipbuilding, exactly 1 year before the battle that would make her famous. Specifications: 376 feet long, 39 feet beam, 2,700 tons displacement, 5 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns, 10 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns, 7 20mm Ehrlichen cannons, 10 21-inch torpedo tubes carrying Mark 15 torpedoes, top speed 38 knots, range 6,000 nautical miles at 15 knots. Fletcher-class destroyers were designed for one primary mission: protect larger ships from aircraft and submarines. They were never meant to engage battleships in surface combat. When Evans took command, he assembled his crew of 327 officers and men. His commissioning speech became legendary in the destroyer force. "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." Nobody got off. Evans trained his crew relentlessly. Gunnery drills until the gun crews could load and fire in their sleep. Torpedo runs until the torpedo men could launch a full spread in under 2 minutes. Damage control exercises until every sailor could patch a hull blindfolded. He demanded perfection, not because he was a martinet, because he knew their lives would depend on it. Johnston arrived in the Pacific in February 1944. First combat, supporting the Marshalls invasion, then the Marianas, then Palau. Every operation, Johnston performed flawlessly. Evans developed a reputation, aggressive, fearless, willing to take calculated risks that other commanders wouldn't. By October 1944, Johnston was part of Taffy 3, Task Unit 77.4.3, 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, 4 destroyer escorts. Their mission? Provide air support for the Leyte Gulf invasion. Escort carriers were tiny compared to fleet carriers. 10,000 tons, 19 knots maximum speed, wooden decks. The Navy called them baby flat tops. Sailors called them Kaiser coffins because they were built so quickly at Kaiser shipyards. Each escort carrier carried 28 aircraft, Grumman FM-2 Wildcats and Grumman TBM Avengers, good for ground support, patrol, anti-submarine work, not designed for fleet combat. Taffy Free was expendable. That's why they put it at Samar, the quiet sector where nothing was supposed to happen.
Admiral Soemu Toyoda conceived Operation Sho-Go, one final, decisive naval battle to destroy the American invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf. 3 forces would converge: Southern Force through Surigao Strait, Central Force through San Bernardino Strait, carriers from the north as decoys. Central Force was the main strike. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita commanding 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 11 destroyers. Their target? The transport ships anchored at Leyte Gulf, defenseless cargo vessels packed with supplies and reinforcements. If Kurita destroyed those transports, the American invasion would collapse. Thousands of soldiers would be stranded without food, ammunition, or medical supplies. The Philippines campaign would fail. American intelligence knew about Southern Force and the carrier decoy. They didn't know about Central Force coming through San Bernardino Strait. Admiral William Bull Halsey took 3rd Fleet north to chase the Japanese carriers, leaving San Bernardino unguarded. At 6:45 a.m. on October 25th, Kurita's fleet emerged from San Bernardino Strait. Clear weather, calm seas, perfect visibility. They turned south toward Leyte Gulf. At 6:46 a.m., a lookout on escort carrier Fanshawe Bay spotted masts on the horizon. He thought they were American ships from Halsey's fleet. They weren't. At 6:58 a.m., Taffy 3 realized the truth. The largest Japanese battle force in the Pacific was 17 miles away and closing fast. Between them and the transport ships, 6 escort carriers that couldn't outrun a destroyer, and 7 small warships that shouldn't engage anything larger than a submarine. Admiral Clifton Sprague commanded Taffy 3 from escort carrier Fanshawe Bay. He ordered the carriers to run south, launch all aircraft, and make smoke. He ordered the destroyers and destroyer escorts to make a torpedo attack. A torpedo attack meant charging directly at battleships, getting close enough, within 10,000 yards, to launch torpedoes, then trying to survive long enough to escape. Most destroyer commanders would have made a feint attack, close to 15,000 yards, fire torpedoes at maximum range, turn away before the battleships could bracket them with gunfire. Ernest Evans didn't do feints.
At 7 a.m., Evans orders flank speed. Johnston's boilers surge to maximum pressure. The twin General Electric turbines generate 60,000 shaft horsepower. The destroyer accelerates to 35 knots, throwing a massive bow wave. Evans doesn't wait for Admiral Sprague's order. He doesn't coordinate with the other destroyers. He just attacks, alone. Immediately. His executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Robert Hagen, stands beside him on the bridge. Hagen later recalled, "The captain had no intention of retreating. I think he decided we were going to go down fighting, and he was going to make it cost them." Johnston charges directly toward the Japanese formation. Range: 32,000 yards, and closing. The Japanese battleships spot Johnston at 7:05 a.m. Yamato's fire control radar locks on. Range:
30,000 yards. The giant battleship's forward turret rotates toward this tiny target. At 7:07 a.m., Yamato fires. 9 18.1-inch shells, each weighing 3,200 pounds, arc through the sky. Flight time, approximately 40 seconds at this range. The shells impact 500 yards ahead of Johnston. Massive water columns erupt 300 feet high. The concussion wave rocks the destroyer, but Evans doesn't flinch. He maintains course and speed. Johnston's crew watches the Japanese fleet grow larger. They can see individual ships now, the massive pagoda mast of Yamato, the angular superstructure of Congo-class battleships, the heavy cruisers with their distinctive forward turrets. Lieutenant Commander Hagen turns to Evans. "Captain, recommend we come to torpedo launch course." Evans shakes his head. "Not yet. Closer." At 7:12 a.m., heavy cruiser Kumano opens fire. 8 8-inch guns. Johnston's forward mast is hit by shrapnel, but the destroyer maintains course and speed. Range, 18,000 yards. Still too far for torpedoes. The Japanese can't understand what they're seeing. One destroyer charging their entire fleet. It doesn't make tactical sense. Some officers wonder if it's a diversion, if American battleships are approaching from another direction. There are no American battleships. There's just Johnston.
At 7:16 a.m., Evans orders, "Come left to course 260. Prepare torpedoes." Johnston heels hard into a turn. The torpedo crews on the port and starboard racks stand ready. 10 Mark 15 torpedoes, each one 21 inches diameter, 24 feet long, 3,200 pounds, 825-pound Torpex warhead. Maximum range, 15,000 yards at 26.5 knots. Minimum practical range, 10,000 yards, to give the torpedoes time to arm. Evans wants to get closer, much closer. At 7:20 a.m., range drops to 12,000 yards. Heavy cruiser Haguro scores a hit on Johnston's fantail. The shell penetrates the aft deckhouse but doesn't explode. It passes completely through and exits the other side. Structural damage, but no casualties. At 7:24 a.m., range 10,000 yards. Evans, "Fire all torpedoes." Johnston launches all 10 torpedoes in a single spread, 5 from the port tubes, 5 from starboard. They hit the water with metallic splashes, accelerate to attack speed, leave white wakes streaking toward the Japanese formation. The torpedoes run straight and true, no malfunctions, perfect launch. Evans immediately orders, "Right full rudder, make smoke. Emergency flank speed." Johnston turns hard right and runs southwest, laying a massive smoke screen from her smoke generators. Heavy black chemical smoke billows behind the destroyer, creating a wall 30 feet high. The Japanese gunners lose visual contact. Johnston disappears into her own smoke. But the torpedoes keep running. At 7:28 a.m., the first torpedo strikes heavy cruiser Kumano. The explosion tears off Kumano's bow. The cruiser loses steering control, slews to port, drops out of formation. Kumano will spend the next 8 months in repair. 2 more torpedoes pass within 100 yards of Yamato. Admiral Kurita, watching from Yamato's bridge, orders emergency turn to port to avoid them. The entire Japanese formation executes a turn, away from the escort carriers, away from the transport ships. Johnston's torpedo attack has forced the most powerful battleship ever built to turn away. One destroyer has disrupted the entire Japanese battle plan, but Evans knows the reprieve is temporary. The Japanese will regroup, reorganize, resume their advance, and Johnston is now between them and the escort carriers, exactly where Evans wants to be.
Johnston emerges from the smokescreen at 7:32 a.m. Her crew checks for damage. The fantail hit created a 3-foot hole, but it's above the waterline. No flooding. All systems operational. Evans scans the horizon. The other destroyers, USS Hull and USS Heermann, are making their torpedo runs now, approaching from different angles. The destroyer escorts, Samuel B. Roberts, Dennis, John C. Butler, Raymond, are closing for their attacks. The Japanese formation has scattered. Individual ships are maneuvering independently. Some are still turning to avoid torpedoes.
Others are engaging the small American ships with increasingly accurate gunfire. At 7:35 a.m., Evans makes another decision. Stay between the Japanese and the carriers. Draw fire. Buy time. Johnston positions herself 7,000 yards from the nearest Japanese heavy cruiser, Tone. Too close for comfort, but the perfect range for Johnston's 5-inch guns. Evans orders, gun crews, target that cruiser. Continuous fire. Don't stop until I say stop. Gun Captain Lieutenant Ellsworth Welch controls Johnston's 5-inch guns from the Mark 37 Fire Control Director. The analog computer calculates range, bearing, target speed, wind, and ship motion. The solution feeds to all 5 gun mounts simultaneously. At 7:36 a.m., Johnston opens fire. The 5 guns fire in sequence, 1 round per gun, every 3 seconds. Each 5-inch .38 shell weighs 55 pounds. The guns can engage targets at 18,000 yards maximum range, but effective range is much closer, around 10,000 yards for moving targets. Johnston fires 40 rounds in 2 minutes. The 5-inch shells arc toward Tone. Most miss. Hitting a maneuvering target at 7,000 yards requires perfect timing, but several shells connect. They don't penetrate Tone's armor, but they damage her superstructure, destroy radar antennas, and start fires on her deck. Tone returns fire. 8 8-inch guns, 260-pound shells, but Johnston is moving fast, making continuous course changes, harder to hit.
At 7:42 a.m., Johnston shifts fire to another cruiser, Haguro. Again, continuous fire. Again, forcing the cruiser to maneuver, disrupting its attack on the carriers. Evans is doing exactly what destroyers are designed to do: harass capital ships, force them to react, prevent them from focusing on their primary target. But he's outnumbered 23-1. At 7:45 a.m., 3 Japanese destroyers detach from the main formation. They're coming specifically for Johnston. Their mission? Silence this aggressive American destroyer so the cruisers can focus on the carriers. Evans sees them approaching. Range, 12,000 yards in closing. He orders, come right to 180, target those destroyers. Johnston turns to face them head-on. The range closes rapidly. 10,000 yards, 9,000, 8,000. At 7,500 yards, Johnston opens fire. The 5-inch guns shift to rapid fire mode, 1 shell every 2 seconds per gun. The gun crews work with mechanical precision, loading, firing, loading, firing, loading, firing. The first salvo straddles the lead Japanese destroyer. The second salvo hits. A 5-inch shell penetrates the destroyer's bridge, destroying her fire control. The Japanese destroyer turns away, trailing smoke. The other 2 destroyers continue closing. They return fire. 5-inch shells bracket Johnston, splashing 50 yards to port, 30 yards to starboard. Shrapnel peppers Johnston's superstructure. At 7:52 a.m., Johnston scores another hit on the second Japanese destroyer. The shell strikes her forward gun mount, destroying the weapon. 2 Japanese sailors are wounded. The 3 Japanese destroyers break off their attack. They've engaged Johnston for 7 minutes and achieve nothing except damage. They return to the main formation. Evans has driven off 3 destroyers with superior firepower, but the victory comes at a cost. At 8:05 a.m., Battleship Congo finally gets a clean firing solution on Johnston. Range, 16,000 yards. Congo fires a full salvo from her forward 14-inch guns. The shells arrive at 8:06 a.m. The first shell misses, impacting 20 yards to starboard. The second shell hits Johnston amidships, just below the bridge. The 14-inch shell weighs 1,400 pounds. It penetrates the hull, travels through the interior compartments, and explodes in the fire room. The explosion tears apart boiler room number 2. Superheated steam erupts through ruptured pipes. 3 sailors in the fire room don't survive. The boiler shuts down instantly. Johnston loses 50% of her propulsion power. Maximum speed drops from 35 knots to 17 knots. A second shell strikes the bridge superstructure. It doesn't explode. A dud, but the kinetic impact destroys the forward fire control director and radar systems.
Shrapnel tears through the bridge. Commander Evans is standing at his station when the shell hits. Shrapnel slices through his left hand, severing 2 fingers. More shrapnel cuts his face and neck. Blood pours from the wounds. Evans staggers but doesn't fall. He wraps his hand in a torn shirt, creating a crude bandage. Lieutenant Commander Hagen rushes to him. "Captain, you need medical attention." Evans, "I'm fine. Status report." Hagen, "Fire room 2 destroyed. 3 men lost. Forward fire control offline. We're down to local control on the 5-inch guns. Maximum speed, 17 knots. Evans looks at his bandaged hand. Blood is soaking through the fabric. The pain must be overwhelming, but his expression doesn't change. He turns to the helmsman. "Maintain course. Engine room, give me everything you've got left." At 8:08 a.m., Johnston is hit again. This shell comes from heavy cruiser tone. It strikes aft, penetrating the engine room. The explosion damages the port reduction gear. Johnston's speed drops to 15 knots. The destroyer is slowing down. The Japanese are closing in, and Evans has lost his main fire control system. But he hasn't lost his guns. Evans climbs down from the bridge, moving carefully because his balance is affected by blood loss. He goes directly to the aft 5-inch gun mount. Mount 55. The gun captain sees his wounded commander approaching. "Captain, sir, you should be in sick bay." Evans, "I'm taking manual control of this mount. Stand by to receive firing solutions." Without the forward fire control director, each gun mount must aim independently using local optical sights. It's slower, less accurate, but it works. Evans positions himself at Mount 55's site, his wounded hand still bleeding. He calculates range and bearing manually, shouts corrections to the gun crew. At 8:12 a.m., Mount 55 fires. The shell strikes Cruiser Tone's waterline. Minor damage, but it proves the guns still work. Evans moves from mount to mount, personally directing fire. He's operating on adrenaline and willpower, ignoring the pain, refusing to leave his post. At 8:15 a.m., Johnston has fired 325 rounds of 5-inch ammunition. She has 200 rounds remaining. That's approximately 8 minutes of continuous fire at current rate. Evans knows the mathematics. Johnston can't win this fight. She's too slow, too damaged, too outnumbered. But she can still fight, and fighting means buying time for the escort carriers to escape.
At 8:20 a.m., Admiral Sprague orders the remaining destroyers and destroyer escorts to make another torpedo attack. The Japanese cruisers are getting too close to the escort carriers. Something has to stop them. USS Herman and USS Hull respond. Both destroyers charge toward the Japanese heavy cruisers Chikuma and Tone. Evans watches them go. Johnston has no torpedoes left. She expended all 10 in the first attack, but she can provide covering fire. At 8:22 a.m., Evans orders, "Come left to 090. Increase speed to maximum available." Johnston turns toward the Japanese cruisers. Her damaged engines struggle to push her to 18 knots. Smoke pours from her funnel. She's barely faster than the escort carriers she's protecting. At 8:25 a.m., Johnston engages cruiser Chikuma. The 5-inch guns fire continuously. Mount 55 scores a hit on Chikuma's superstructure. Mount 54 hits near the waterline. Mount 53 damages Chikuma's forward turret. The shells don't penetrate Chikuma's armor, but they distract her. Chikuma's fire control radar locks onto Johnston instead of the escort carriers. The cruiser fires a full salvo at Johnston. 8-inch shells bracket the destroyer. One shell strikes Johnston's starboard side, penetrating the hull above the waterline. The explosion tears a 6-foot hole. Water floods 2 compartments, but the damage control teams seal the breach. At 8:30 a.m., USS Hull makes her torpedo run. She launches a full spread at Chikuma from 6,000 yards.
The torpedoes run true. Chikuma turns hard to starboard, avoiding the torpedoes by less than 100 yards. But the evasive maneuver takes Chikuma out of the fight temporarily. She's 3,000 yards north of her previous position. Her firing solution, ruin. Evans sees the opportunity. While Chikuma is turning, her stern is exposed. Her armor is thinnest there. Evans, all guns, target Chikuma's stern. Fire for effect. 3 of Johnston's remaining 5-inch guns have clear shots. They fire together, launching shells at 3-second intervals. At 8:32 a.m., 2 shells hit Chikuma's stern. One penetrates the thin armor, explodes inside the hull. The explosion damages Chikuma's steering mechanism. The cruiser's rudder jams, forcing her into a continuous turn to starboard.
Chikuma drops out of the formation, unable to steer properly. She'll need 2 hours to repair the damage. Johnston has neutralized her second Japanese cruiser, but the cost is mounting. At 8:35 a.m., battleship Haruna engages Johnston from 18,000 yards. Haruna's 14-inch guns fire. The shells take 45 seconds to arrive. During that time, Evans orders emergency turn to port. The shells miss by 80 yards, close enough that the splashes drench Johnston's deck. At 8:38 a.m., Johnston is hit again. This time, multiple shells from different Japanese ships arrive simultaneously. 1 8-inch shell, 2 6-inch shells, 3 5-inch shells. The 8-inch shell penetrates Johnston's midship section, destroying the central ammunition handling room. 40 rounds of 5-inch ammunition are lost. More importantly, the damage severs electrical connections to mounts 52 and 53. 2 of Johnston's 5 main guns go offline. The 6-inch shells strike the superstructure and main deck. They cause fragmentation damage, wounding 6 sailors. The 5-inch shells hit the aft deck, destroying one of the 40 mm anti-aircraft mounts. Johnston now has 3 5-inch guns operational, reduced speed, no torpedoes, and a captain who's lost significant blood. At 8:40 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Hagen again approaches Evans. "Captain, we should withdraw. We've done everything possible." Evans looks at the escort carriers on the horizon. They're still running south, launching aircraft, making smoke. Still vulnerable. Evans, "We're not done yet." At 8:42 a.m., heavy cruiser Tone approaches from Johnston's port side, range 8,000 yards. Tone's guns are trained directly on Johnston. This is execution range, close enough that even damaged fire control systems can't miss.
Evans knows Johnston can't outrun Tone, can't outmaneuver her, can't survive much longer. But she can make Tone pay attention. Evans, "Left full rudder, steer directly for that cruiser. All guns, continuous fire." Johnston turns hard to port, pointing her bow directly at Tone. The 3 operational 5-inch guns open fire. Shells arc toward the cruiser in rapid succession. Evans is charging a heavy cruiser with a destroyer that can barely make 17 knots. It's insane. It's desperate. It works. Tone's captain sees Johnston turning toward him and panics. He thinks Johnston is preparing to ram. Japanese doctrine emphasizes avoiding ramming attacks. They're unpredictable and often mutually fatal. Tone turns away, breaking off her approach toward the escort carriers. She focuses entirely on Johnston, firing salvo after salvo. But Johnston's aggressive move has disrupted Tone's attack. The cruiser is now heading northwest, away from the carriers. At 8:45 a.m., Johnston has accomplished her mission. The escort carriers are 15 miles south, nearly out of range. The Japanese cruisers have been delayed, damaged, scattered. But Johnston herself is dying.
At 8:50 a.m., Johnston takes 3 more hits in rapid succession. 1 shell destroys the aft engine room. Both engines shut down completely. Johnston loses all power. The destroyer coasts to a stop, dead in the water. No propulsion, no electrical power, no steering. Evans climbs back to the bridge. His wounded hand has stopped bleeding, but he's weak from blood loss. The bridge is wrecked. Shattered glass, twisted metal, fires burning in 3 locations. He orders, "All hands, prepare for surface action. Break out small arms." The crew distributes rifles and pistols. If Japanese ships close for the finish, Johnston's crew will fight hand-to-hand. At 8:55 a.m., 4 Japanese destroyers approach from different directions. They form a ring around Johnston, 4,000 yards distant. They're not taking chances. They'll shell Johnston from safe range until she sinks. Johnston's remaining 3 5-inch guns switch to manual loading and firing. The gun crews work without power, using manual elevation and traverse. It's slow, exhausting work. Mount 55 fires at the nearest destroyer. The shell misses by 100 yards. Mount 54 fires. Another miss. The Japanese destroyers return fire. Shells hit Johnston's hull, punching holes above and below the waterline. Water floods the forward compartments. At 9 a.m., Johnston lists 10 degrees to port. She's taking on water faster than the damage control teams can pump it out. Evans stands on the bridge, watching his ship die. He's been in command for 11 months. In that time, Johnston participated in 6 major operations, fought in 7 separate engagements. Now she has 20 minutes left. At 9:05 a.m., a Japanese heavy cruiser, Yahagi, closes to 6,000 yards. Her 6-inch guns fire methodically, 1 salvo every 40 seconds. Each salvo hits Johnston. The destroyer's superstructure collapses. Fires rage across the main deck. Johnston's crew fights back with whatever weapons remain. The 40mm anti-aircraft guns fire at Yahagi, doing no damage, but making noise, showing defiance. The crew doesn't want to leave. Sailors look to their captain, waiting for him to lead them off the ship. Evans, that's an order. Get in the water now. Lieutenant Commander Hagen helps organize the evacuation. Sailors jump from the listing deck, swimming away from the ship before she goes down. They have no life rafts. All were destroyed by gunfire. They have Kapok life jackets, nothing else. At 9:15 a.m., 200 men are in the water. Another 100 remain on the ship, fighting fires, trying to save Johnston. Evans remains on the bridge. Some sailors later reported seeing him helping wounded crew members into the water. Others said he stayed at his post, going down with his ship. At 9:20 a.m., Johnston's list reached 40 degrees. Water pours through the holes in her hull. The forward deck is completely submerged. One final detail appears in multiple survivor accounts. As Johnston began her final plunge, a Japanese destroyer, possibly Okanami, steamed slowly past the sinking American vessel. The Japanese captain appeared on his bridge and saluted. A rare moment of respect between enemies. The Japanese understood what Johnston had done. 1 destroyer against an entire fleet. 2 hours of impossible courage. At 9:50 a.m., USS Johnston slipped beneath the surface, bow first. She sank in 22,000 feet of water, taking 186 officers and men with her. 141 survivors floated in the oil-slicked ocean, waiting for rescue. Commander Ernest E. Evans was not among the survivors. His body was never recovered. The survivors of Johnston floated in the Philippine Sea for 2 days. On October 27th, U.S. Navy ships found them. 141 men rescued, 186 lost. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hagen survived. He provided detailed reports of the action, ensuring Evans's heroism would be officially documented. The battle off Samar ended at 9:20 a.m. when Admiral Kurita ordered his fleet to withdraw. The Japanese had overwhelming superiority, 4 battleships against escort carriers, but the fierce resistance from Taffy III's destroyers convinced Kurita he was facing a much stronger force. He retreated, saving the American landing at Leyte Gulf. Historians call it one of the greatest last stands in naval history. 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts held off the most powerful Japanese surface fleet of the war. They sank 3 cruisers, damaged several others,
and forced the entire formation to withdraw. On June 19, 1945, President Harry S. Truman awarded the Medal of Honor to Commander Ernest E. Evans posthumously. The citation reads in part, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, boldly closing the range despite the enemy's tremendous superiority in firepower, Commander Evans brought his ship from a position of comparative safety into the full fury of battle." Evans became the first Native American naval officer to receive the Medal of Honor. The citation emphasized his tactical skill, his courage under fire, and his absolute refusal to abandon the fight.
The Navy never forgot Johnston. In 1945, the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, called the Battle off Samar the most gallant naval action in our history. He specifically mentioned Johnston's charge against Yamato. In 1957, the Navy commissioned a new destroyer, USS Ernest E. Evans, DD-754. She served until 1973. On October 31, 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo located Johnston's wreck using deep-sea submersibles. She lies 21,180 feet below the surface, the deepest shipwreck ever found at that time. The hull is relatively intact, though colonized by deep-sea organisms. Her bow faces north toward the last Japanese position she engaged. Vescovo's team photographed Johnston's wreckage, but didn't disturb it. Under U.S. law, the wreck is a war grave, protected from salvage. 186 sailors remain entombed in that steel hull 4 miles beneath the Philippine Sea. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hagen went on to serve in the Korean War. He retired as a captain in 1963. Until his passing in 2002, he gave lectures about Johnston, ensuring younger generations understood what his shipmates accomplished. Lieutenant Ellsworth Welch, the gunnery officer, survived the battle. He wrote extensive notes about Johnston's fire control procedures, which became required reading at the Naval Academy. The 141 survivors scattered across the country after the war. Most didn't talk about the battle for decades. Some couldn't. The trauma was too severe. But starting in the 1970s, Johnston survivors began attending annual reunions. They shared stories, honored their fallen shipmates, kept the memory alive. The last Johnston survivor, Robert Billy, passed away in 2015 at age 91.
Johnston's tactics at Samar influenced destroyer doctrine for decades. Before October 25, 1944, destroyer skippers followed conservative engagement rules: stay beyond enemy gun range, launch torpedoes, withdraw. Evans proved aggressive attacks work. Charging capital ships forces them to react defensively. Confusion and disruption are force multipliers. Post-war destroyer training incorporated Johnston tactics: rapid closing, massed torpedo attacks, continuous harassment fire. During the Cold War, NATO destroyer squadrons practiced similar techniques against Soviet surface action groups. The lesson? Small ships with aggressive commanders can defeat larger forces through audacity and tactical innovation. Let's review what one destroyer accomplished in 2 hours. Forced Yamato, the most powerful battleship ever built, to turn away. Neutralized heavy cruiser Kumano with a torpedo hit, removing her from battle for 8 months. Damaged heavy cruiser Chikuma, jamming her rudder. Damaged heavy cruiser Tone's superstructure and radar. Drove off 3 Japanese destroyers. Fired 325 rounds of 5-inch ammunition. Absorbed hits from at least 14-inch, 8-inch, 6-inch, and 5-inch shells. Bought the escort carriers 15 critical minutes to escape. Johnston displaced 2,700 tons. The Japanese ships she engaged displaced over 200,000 tons combined. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and mathematically doomed. She fought anyway.
The battle off Samar took place at approximately 11.5 degrees north, 126.3 degrees east, 70 miles east of Samar Island, Philippines. Today, the location is international waters.
No memorial marks the spot, but every year on October 25th, the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet holds a brief ceremony, transmitting a radio message on maritime frequencies. To the crew of USS Johnston, we remember, we will never forget. You saved the fleet. The message goes unanswered. 4 miles below, in absolute darkness and crushing pressure, Johnston rests on the seabed. Her guns are silent now, but her story continues. If this story moved you, please hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps us share these forgotten histories with more people. YouTube's algorithm promotes videos that get likes in the first hour, so your click directly determines whether others learn about Commander Evans and his crew. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're rescuing these stories from dusty archives and naval records every week. Real people, real courage, real history that deserves to be remembered. Drop a comment and tell us, where are you watching from? Did someone in your family serve in World War II? Do you have a connection to the Navy or the Philippines? We read every comment. This isn't just a channel. It's a community that believes these men deserve to be remembered. Next week, we're covering another incredible story from the Pacific Theater. Until then, thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. Fair winds and following seas to the crew of USS Johnston. They saved thousands of lives by refusing to accept defeat.